Star Wars Hunters is finally releasing tomorrow, and over the weekend there's been quite a lot of new articles released about the game, following interviews from various news websites, speaking to some of the game's directors, such as Richard Kemp and a few others. And from those articles we've had a few new details released about what could be coming in the future, but also why the game was delayed and just kind of the overall process surrounding that. So that's what I'm going to be going into in today's video. But before I do get into that, do make sure you are subscribed to the channel to stay fully up to date with all things Star Wars Hunters. Obviously with the game releasing tomorrow, I'm going to be streaming it loads. I'm making lots of videos on it of course as well, so make sure you don't miss out on any of that. But without wasting any more time, let's just jump straight into it. So this article here was released by PocketGamer.com, and they went pretty on the nose with a question going on about how the game was first announced in 2021 and has since been delayed a few times, and essentially just asked why, to which game director Scott Warner responded, basically just saying that that's one of the benefits of soft launch. It basically means that you can just make the game better over time whilst still getting it into a live market so that you can properly test things on a larger scale user base, so that it is essentially the very best it possibly can be before the game's full launch. So that is ultimately the main reason as to why the game was delayed. Now obviously it's been a number of times. It was originally due late 2021, got pushed to 22, then 23, and now finally into 24, and the game's obviously releasing tomorrow as I said. So clearly the game is in a position that they finally feel is ready for launch, and they will continue to iterate the game obviously when it's live, but I think to give the game its best chances of success, the game itself obviously has to be good, which to me personally I think it's always been good, but it genuinely is in the best shape it's ever been in, and obviously it has been a long time, so I'm just glad it's finally going to be in everyone's hands. Now regarding the future of the game, it talks here in this question regarding why specifically they've chosen to go after the end of the original trilogy and not go as far as the sequels, and there absolutely is a reason, because Rich Kemp here, who is the creative director currently on the game, is saying that he's trying to figure out what he can and can't say. But one of the things that I find really intriguing is that he says it gives us flexibility to tell stories that we can develop over time. So like a lot of multiplayer games these days, like Fortnite originally set this trend of essentially live storytelling through gameplay and the progression of seasons, there's clearly going to be a big story told throughout. And he says that we want enough runway so that hopefully the game lasts a decade in terms of content support, I assume he's referring to. And that means that they don't essentially bump into anything like the sequels where things actually properly happen. So setting it in a time where, well, essentially nothing really happens that we know of so far, it means that they can have as much freedom and flexibility around the stories they tell, which I think is absolutely a smart thing. And if they went to around the sequel trilogy time, there's a lot happening with the First Order, and if they go post sequels, well, that's obviously an area of Star Wars that hasn't been touched yet and is soon to be touched on in the new Rey film that's coming out in a few years. So it allows Lucasfilm to try and figure out what they want the galaxy to actually look like around that period of time. Now the final question I wanted to go over is this one here, where they ask about what kind of things can we expect to see in the game post-launch, and do you foresee a future where a character's skin could potentially be a character in the game, which I think is definitely a really interesting thing. I've said for a long time that that just won't happen. We obviously won't see the likes of Darth Vader in this game because he was obviously dead at this point and the game is canon. So in terms of the content we can expect to see post-launch, we've got lots of different cosmetics on the way for each character, which is always nice to see. New characters, new maps, new game modes, and no doubt more, which I think is kind of obvious. We were definitely expecting to see a lot more cosmetics, modes, maps, and characters. They are the kind of biggest pillars of content that the game can receive, with the new hunters definitely being the most exciting given that they add a lot more gameplay to the game. So I'm definitely very excited to see a lot more of those. Now with regard to the part of the question where they talk about whether or not a character's skin could become a character, Rich says that in terms of existing characters, we already have costumes in the game that are representative of those characters. So rather than bringing those characters in, we are hunters, paying homage to those heroes and villains from the past. So obviously any character from the past we will never see, and by that I mean like the deep past, you know, like Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and so on, because they're either dead or they're just busy doing things like Luke building his Jedi temple. So obviously he wouldn't be taking part in this professional sporting arena, which is essentially what Hunters is all about. But I think if it makes sense for a particular character, let's just say Chrysanthemum for example, if we never see anything else with Chrysanthemum following the book of Boba Fett season 1, if they never make a season 2 and he doesn't show up in the Mandalorian film, and so he doesn't join Boba Fett's crew like I was kind of expecting him to, then there's no reason why he can't be part of the arena perhaps as the next stage of his, I guess, bounty hunting career. So I think something like that would be quite cool, or if there's just a random background character in The Mandalorian, for example, then I think it would be cool for them to show up in this game, but I do think that is probably quite unlikely, but we will just have to wait and see. I think it's very clear that we probably will be getting more original characters than anything else. I think the chances of an actual real character from Star Wars that's already appeared is hugely unlikely, which I honestly don't really mind. I think the original characters are all a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to learning more about their stories. That is pretty much everything from this article. Like I said, there are so many more out there that probably have even more information on this game and the development of it, so be sure to keep your eyes out because they will definitely be worth reading. That is it from me though. Like I said, I'm going to be streaming Hunters tomorrow and the rest of this week really, and of course a lot going forward, so make sure you subscribe to the channel to not miss out on any of that. That is it from me today though. Thank you all very much for watching, and may the force be with you always.